So, Adam, this movie doesn't fit in with any sort of programming this year, but I'm always interested when I kind of make a new acquaintance or a friend now. I would consider you, obviously, given that we've done this a couple times now. I'm always interested what is something or the movies that motivate you or drive you or something that, like, when you say, I want to talk about a movie, or, hey, what do you want to talk about? Sometimes people are like, yeah, whatever. But I always appreciate when someone's like, this is what I want to talk about. Because again, the passion behind things needs to be apparent when you're entertaining people, because people resonate with someone who's passionate. And just like the last movie we talked about, The Other, this is a movie that you were like, let's do this. Have you ever seen this? I believe, and you'll tell me, you have a poster of this in your house, do you not?
I do. A Style B one sheet with all the caricatures of the cast of the film. There's several posters of this one, but the one that I prefer is the one that has all the caricatures on it. So, well, it's funny you asked that question about what gets me fired up. When it comes to comedies, I mean, everybody has a certain sense of humor is subjective, obviously, and everybody has their own sense of humor. But I'm always curious about the things that make me laugh, and I always like to see if the things that make me laugh make other people laugh. And What's Up, Doc is one of those films that, has consistently made me laugh for decades and decades, and I'm always curious to see if it does the trick for others.
Well, you'll be getting your answer here pretty quickly. On this episode of the Culture Cast, I'm still your host, Chris Dasho. I'm joined by my good friend. He is the home video correspondent for Movie Geeks United. He shows up there once a month to talk all the DVDs, but DVDs, they don't release those anymore. Blu-rays and other ephemera that get released throughout the month. Your friend and mine, all the way from another corner of the internet, my friend Adam Long.
Hello again. Good to be back.
And on this episode, if you've clicked on it, you know what we're going to be talking about, but we are talking about the 1972 madcap, mad dash screwball comedy directed by Peter Bogdanovich, What's Up, Doc?
Barbra Streisand and Ryan O'Neal in their biggest hit. See Barbra Streisand, see Ryan O'Neal.
What's up, Doc?
See Ryan O'Neal, see Barbra Streisand.
Get out! No, wait a minute!
See Barbara light Ryan's fire.
I've got to tell Eunice. Of course you do.
See Ryan light his own fire. See the CIA, see the spy. See the spy and the CIA, see the sea. See the Volkswagen get busted. See everyone get busted.
He smashed my lifesavers.
See What's Up, Doc, and see What's Up.
Yeah?
What's Up, Doc, from Warner Brothers, rated G.
So, like I mentioned, it is directed by Peter Bogdanovich, based on a story by Peter Bogdanovich, with a screenplay by Buck Henry, David Newman, and Robert Benton, and it stars Barbra Streisand and Ryan O'Neal, along with Kenneth Mars and Austin Pendleton and Madeline Kahn in her first film role, even. And the film is, it's a live-action cartoon in a way that only Peter Bogdanovich could do. And it's all about Ryan O'Neal, who plays he plays Dr. Howard Bannister, a musicologist from Iowa who comes to San Francisco to try and get a grant from Austin Pendleton's Frederick Larrabee. And along the way, the case that he's bringing with him that has his rocks in it gets swapped with not one, not two, but three other cases, one with some top secret documents, one with jewels, and one with literally just clothing. Along the way, he meets Barbra Streisand and a whole host of other wacky characters in a movie that I could only explain as, like I've already mentioned, a live-action cartoon. So, Adam, I'm going to kick it to you first. Wax poetically about What's Up, Doc, because that's why you're here, brother man.
Well, I'm always curious about, and of course, this is obviously your first time seeing this film, but I'm always interested about other, the first time that people saw the film, and I like to talk about the time that I saw it first. And that's what's so funny, because when I was in 10th grade, I had a really close friend, and I quickly ascertained that we had a similar sensibility in films. And this is in the mid 80s, and I was still, learning about movies, trying to delve into film history. And he just recommended to me that I see What's Up, Doc. He said, it's probably the funniest movie I've ever seen. But I don't know whether you'll like it or not. I can't say, but I think you should see it. I think it's the funniest film I've ever seen. So I said, okay, sure, why not? So it turned up on one of the cable channels. This, like I said, is probably around 1986. And I sat down and I thought it was funny. I laughed a lot, but it was only on subsequent viewings, I think, that it really started to catch on. And the more I saw it, the funnier it got, the better it got, and it has just, to me, reached a point where I think it's a yardstick by which I measure people's sense of humor that I spend time with. I mean, if I'm hanging, especially if I'm dating somebody, I always use this as one of those litmus tests. Let's watch What's Up, Doc, and see what this person thinks of it, because it doesn't make them a bad person or a good person. It just may make them a person that is not a good match for me, because if they're sitting there stone-faced and they're not laughing at this film, it's probably not going to get any better from that point on. Yeah, I
love that, by the way. The audience can't see me laughing because I'm holding it in, but I totally get it. I totally get it. It as crazy as it may sound, I get that sentiment 100%. And I think it's funny because I don't think enough people like yourself and myself admit these kinds of things out loud. But thank you for saying something like that, because you're totally right. Something that matters to you, that you resonate with as much as this, it is a kind of litmus test in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It really is. And there's nothing more uncomfortable than being with somebody that your potential romantic partner, and you're watching something and one of you is laughing hysterically and the other is not. That is a very uncomfortable moment that you don't want to experience if you can avoid it. So
yeah, I can imagine.
This is but going back to my friend, he's gone now, unfortunately. He was unfortunately killed in an accident about 10 years ago. But every time I see this film, I think about this friend of mine from 10th grade who recommended this movie and turned me on to it, because it will stay with me as long as I'm around. It never fails to make me laugh, never fails to just put a smile on my face, put me in a better mood, even though I've seen it many times and know the gags and when the gags are coming and the lines in the film. It's just the performances are so wildly over the top, but they have to be for a film like this. And it was supposedly Peter Bogdanovich's tribute to screwball comedies, and he was a big fan of Howard Hawks and people of of that nature. Those types of films, like Bringing Up Baby, is one of the ones that's cited as an inspiration for this film. And here's the dirty little secret. I think this film is funnier than a lot of the films he's actually paying homage to. Because I've seen it. And now that's not to say Bringing Up Baby is not a good movie. It is a good movie. This just happens to be, for me, a funnier one.
So I have to make a confession. I have not seen a single Peter Bogdanovich film.
Okay, this is a good entry point, I think. So, all right. Well, we can talk a little bit about where his career was at this point, because he was, talk about hot. His career was on fire, my friend, when this movie came out.
And, I really only know him. And again, this is an entry point for me, and this will kind of age and date me. But I know him as Dr. Melfi's psychiatrist in The Sopranos, because he is, I think he's in that show all the way through the end, at least, because Bogdanovich only passed away, last year?
Yeah, January of last year. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, he was on that show through the entire run, and he's fantastic playing her.
Yeah, he's great.
He's playing the kind of erudite therapist that everybody assumes exists out in the world. But all that aside, the other thing is, never seen a Barbra Streisand movie before either. So this is a first for me in a lot of ways. I've also never seen the movie that, and I think you would agree with me, this movie builds up to one gag. There's one joke that this movie wants to tell so badly, and they wait until the end of the movie to tell it. And I loved that they tell that joke, and I know that I get the reference. And I love that I don't have to see the movie to get the reference, because that's the other thing. I've never seen Love Story. I have seen nothing with Ryan O'Neal in it. either. So this is a first for me in a lot of ways. All that aside, this movie is so much fun. I'm really disappointed that I never took Cullen's advice and watched this movie, because Cullen Gallagher, frequent guest on this show, this is one of his favorite movies. He, like yourself, has a poster of it hanging in his living room at his house. So, and now that I've seen it, I totally understand, because not only is this a movie that totally plays in 2023, it would play to a crowd of people now much younger than me, much younger than young enough where I think a Gen Zer might actually think this movie is somewhat entertaining in a lot of ways. But what's funny is I have not seen a movie that is a live action cartoon done right until I saw this movie.
That's a good analogy. And that's essentially what it is. Yeah. My kids, and they're not kids now, of course, they're well into their 20s, but it's a favorite for them as well, because they were raised on this movie and it helped to form their sense of humor, and they still enjoy it quite a bit. So, younger generations can find a lot of humor in this film, I think. And like I said, I was barely driving when I saw this film originally. I just recently gotten my license around the time that I saw this film and that's hard for me to fathom that I've been a fan of it that long, and it has been a part of my life that long. But yes, I think you're right that it would appeal to younger generations as much as older folks who have seen it, like myself.
Well, and I think a lot of that goes to just how goddamn charming Barbra Streisand is, and how perfectly harried Ryan O'Neal is. I dare to say this, but Barbra Streisand and Ryan O'Neal are like the greatest comedy duo that never went and toured together. He's the perfect straight man for her brand of bullshit in this movie, in a way that pays off. It pays off in every scene, and it never gets old, because you would expect in a movie like this, where it really is Barbra Streisand and Ryan O'Neal surrounded by the insanity of everything else, you would figure by the end of the movie, it's like, I'm sick of this. I'm sick of the jokes that these two are doing together, or the gags, or whatever they're going for. But by the end of the movie, it leaves you wanting more, even though they've been at the center of the movie the entire time. They're perfect in every scene. And you would think that it would get a little rote by the end of the movie, but it keeps switching it up and doing interesting things. And then it ends on a meta joke, which ends up working just as well as all of the non-meta slapstick humor in the movie. Because I'm not saying that the movie's not smartly written, but the movie is not written in a meta way. I mean, there are some meta moments and subtext or meta expectational moments that are kind of played with. But the final joke in the movie, it leads me to believe, and I think you would agree, the people who are writing this movie understood how hard this was going to be. And they get away with the metatextual joke of all time at the end of the movie because of how good everything else is. The joke at the end of the movie shouldn't have worked, but because everything else works so well, and because everything else is so tight, the movie is just, again, like the joke at the end of the movie is what it is. But because it's Ryan O'Neal and Barbra Streisand throughout the entire movie together, that payoff at the end totally works because of how good they are together.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is an excellent assessment. Yeah. And you do, obviously the final joke is going to be lost on a lot of people who are removed from Love Story and don't know about its place in popular American culture. And it was a big talking point at that time, because it basically saved Paramount Pictures. They were in some really bad financial trouble after a couple of big flops. I think one of which was Paint Your Wagon with Clint Eastwood, which was their ill-advised musical adaptation starring with Clint Eastwood and Lee Marvin as in a musical. That's I don't know what they were expecting, but that completely bombed in '69. It's
still one of the funniest jokes in The Simpsons, that it feels like they're making it up in The Simpsons, but it totally was exactly what they say it was. It's like the joke is what it is. Like, it's Paint Your Wagon is wow.
Yeah, and another bomb that they had on their hands was, ironically, a Barbra Streisand film, On a Clear Day You Can See Forever, which was another musical that just went absolutely nowhere. I think Yves Montand was the co-star in that one. Now, I've never seen On a Clear Day You Can See Forever, but I'm well aware of its reputation. And Darling Lily, I think, was the third flop they had. that was a Blake Edwards film with Julie Andrews, which I have seen, and it does not work. I have to admit, it's tonally, it's all over the place. It's a drama, it's a musical, and none of it works, unfortunately. Although it has a wonderful score. One of my favorite songs of all time is the "Whistling Away the Dark," which is sung by Julie Andrews in that film and composed by Henry Mancini. I think that's one of the most beautiful songs ever in the history of movies. So it does have one redeeming thing, but it did not. I think it was an 8 million or 10 million production at the time, which was a lot for 1970. And I don't even think it made $1 million. I think it was just, so you had these three big musical failures that were just, had almost sunk Paramount Pictures. And then along comes Love Story, which basically saves them. And so that's why it was such a big talk. And of course we had The Godfather about, a little over a year later, which was another risk when they were making it, of course, and then it proved to be another feather in their cap, shall we say. So, but yeah, that's why Love Story was such a big, that's my Shaggy Dog story getting to the point of why Love Story was such a big deal. But Ryan O'Neal, at the time of Love Story, Robert Evans had to beg him to be in the film, and he was basically known for his work on Peyton Place. I think the television series Peyton Place is the only thing he was known for at that point. But it catapulted him to the leading man status. And so that was, and I don't think he had made another film between Love Story and What's Up, Doc. I think that's the only thing that he had done. So there may be something in there that I'm forgetting, but I don't believe so.
Wild Rovers.
Wow, that's right. That is another Blake Edwards film. That's too funny. I'd totally forgotten about that. But yeah, that was another Blake Edwards film that completely tanked. It was recut by the studio. I think that was an MGM production. I believe it was recut by James Aubrey, who was the head of MGM at the time. They fought famously over the length of that film. And I think the Blake Edwards original version has been reissued on Blu-ray at this point. I think you can see it. I've seen it. It's okay. But it's interesting to see Ryan O'Neal and William Holden teamed up in a film. That's not something you see every day. So, that's
I actually have seen a Ryan O'Neal movie. I misspoke earlier. I watched Barry Lyndon.
Yes, of course, the Kubrick film.
It's okay.
Yep, I think it gets better as it goes on. I think as my take on Barry Lyndon is it starts out very slowly, but if you hang in there, it offers a major payoffs, and it's a beautifully shot film. So yeah, I'm a fan of Barry Lyndon. It just takes a little patience, and I try to tell people that just be patient. It'll get there.
I mean, it's what, like 187 minutes or something. It's lengthy. Yeah, I God, that feels like a lifetime ago, but that was early days of the show. But man, again, I don't even remember it. I don't know. What's interesting is like Ryan O'Neal. I know him as the actor from Love Story. I've never seen Love Story, but I've seen the scene at the end of the movie with him,
of course,
and Ali MacGraw. And Love means never having to say you're sorry. But is this his thing? Is playing this kind of character, like just kind of the straight man and everything?
Well, I think that's pretty much what he was known for. So he was cutting loose a little bit with What's Up, Doc. That was not something that was not his norm. So he was stepping out of his normal, what people knew him for, shall we say.
But he does play the straight man in this movie in a lot of ways, like to everything that's going on with Barbra Streisand's insanity of a character.
Yeah, he does. And you have to have somebody who's somewhat grounded, as he is in the film, to carry it off, because she's obviously the wild card to his straight ace.
And she is just, again, I obviously, say what you will about Barbra Streisand, the person who I think is, she is what she is. I mean, she sounds like a diva, but that's okay. When you're as successful and as mainstream and well-known as she is, you're kind of allowed to be. But she's so effortlessly charming in this movie. Like every time she's on screen, even though she's really putting Ryan O'Neal in a bad way constantly, just putting him in these like insane positions that he has seemingly no way out of, you can't help but cheer for her every time, because it doesn't matter that she's just kind of this, again, like you said, like a wild card, a force of nature, really.
She is. That's for sure. And it's funny because everything that she does, which on the surface looks like she's making a disaster out of his life, it ends up working in his favor as the film goes on over and over and over again.
Which I like that style of storytelling where it seems like the snowball is rolling down the hill out of control, but it's really not. And again, like and I think that's kind of one of the more fun things about this movie is, like we kind of mentioned, that the plot is almost incidental to what's going on. It's, it's a madcap dash for 4 bags that keep getting switched around, which, that's the plot of the movie in as many words. Like, that's about as deep as the movie needs to go, because again, it's a slapstick comedy. So you're not here for the plot. You're here for all the crazy kind of chase scenes at the end of the movie, all of the really well-written, hilarious. Like every line in this movie is almost a joke. They don't skimp on telling jokes through dialogue, which I am like, wordplay is something that I'm a huge fan of. You know this as someone who is an equal fan of Naked Gun and ZAZ films. This is like that done better. Like, I was watching this movie going, why didn't these 3 work on something else that was similar to Naked Gun? Because they totally could have. Because the wordplay and the dialogue humor in this film is it's amazing. And that's the only word I could use. It's amazing.
Right. I totally agree. And, the script, we can credit some of that to the script, which is co-written by Buck Henry, of course, who had done The Graduate several years later, and later on would do Heaven Can Wait and To Die For with Nicole Kidman. Anybody from 1995? That's another Buck Henry screenwriting credit. So he was a great writer of, comedies, whether they be dark comedies or screwball comedies. He had just a really good comedic touch, that Buck Henry. I was a huge fan. And the co-writers, of course, on this are David Newman and Robert Benton, who, of course, Robert Benton would go on to do Kramer versus Kramer later on, and he directed that, and then did Nobody's Fool with Paul Newman later on as well. So he, David Newman would ironically go on to work on the script for Superman the movie a couple of years later. So and Leslie Newman, David and that was his partner, Leslie Newman, they would work on Superman the movie, which supposedly they had there was a lot of comedy in their script for Superman the movie that Tom Mankiewicz supposedly took out of there. And,
sure. That makes sense. Having seen this movie, that totally makes sense.
Yeah, to the point where they had a cameo by Kojak, I think, in one scene in the original script for Superman the movie, where the camera just swoops down. There's Kojak in this big swath of people, and he takes out his lollipop and says, "Who loves you, baby?" or something crazy.
Why not, right?
Way over the top, yeah. But then they brought in Tom Mankiewicz, and he brought in, he kind of pared that stuff down, But anyway, they had an interesting sensibility. They had also worked on, Robert Benton and David Newman had previously worked on Bonnie and Clyde before this. So they had, they worked well together, and I think they were hitting on all cylinders with this script. And it's supposedly loosely based on a novel called A Glimpse of Tiger, which was written by Herman Rauscher, who penned Summer of 42 the year before this, which was obviously a huge, huge hit. And we all know I'm a big fan of that.
And that was an organic mention of it too. I was like about as organic as humanly possible.
But it's true. Herman Rauscher his novel has been credited as being a partial source for the story for this film. I've not read A Glimpse of Tiger, although I do own a copy of it. I guess I should, being such a huge fan of What's Up, Doc. But you were talking about the performances. I think one of the things that sells this movie is the casting of these terrific character actors and actresses, and just people that we've seen in so many other things. Just for example, Mabel Albertson, who was Darren Stevens' mother on Bewitched. She shows up as the lady with the jewels here.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, there are several very familiar faces from Blazing Saddles, Liam Dunn, John Hillerman.
Yes.
We were talking before we recorded some Fletch alumni with Kenneth Mars and Emmett Walsh as well. I mean, and then I think my favorite casting choice in the entire movie is a baby-faced Randy Quaid. Holy shit. with the crazy hair, with the crazy young Randy Quaid hair. Oh my God.
They had a good working relationship, he and Peter Bogdanovich, because Bogdanovich gave him his first break the previous year for Last Picture Show. And he actually gets to skinny dip in the pool with Sybil Shepherd. So that was where he... I think it was an open casting call in Texas, and Randy Quaid showed up, I believe, if memory serves me, and they continued to work together. And then they worked together in the next film, which in my opinion is as good as What's Up, Doc? Paper Moon, which I would highly recommend anybody who saw What's Up, Doc? And liked it to go to Paper Moon, because that's the next logical place you should go, because that's another hysterical homage to 30s comedies, and it also reteams Ryan O'Neal with Peter Bogdanovich, and they have a terrific, and Madeline Kahn as well, she reappears, and John Hillerman, Randy Quaid, they all return from What's Up, Doc? And Paper Moon, and terrifically so, I would say. So that's another great film that I would recommend. But yeah, Randy Quaid, he turns up as a hillbilly that Ryan O'Neal is basically a con man who's being pursued by the law. And it's a very, Paper Moon has a lot of different vignettes, I guess you would say. And one of the vignettes is that he steals a bunch of alcohol during the Prohibition era, steals it from a bootlegger's property, and then resells it to the bootlegger, basically. Not knowing that the bootlegger's twin brother is also a sheriff. Well, John Hillerman plays both parts. He plays the sheriff and the bootlegger. So he's in pursuit of Ryan O'Neal, and Ryan O'Neal has to ditch his vehicle. And so in order to ditch his vehicle, he pulls up to the property off the side of the road, and there's this old truck sitting in the front yard, and it's owned by Randy Quaid's family. So he has to he has to wrestle Randy Quaid in order to get to switch out vehicles, which is kind of it's interesting. So I mean, you mentioned it, like the casting in this movie really is fantastic, because even the smallest roles are well cast. Like the Kenneth Mars character that he's playing is, I think anybody else might have overdone it, but I think it's just the right amount of bizarre, but still kind of staying within the boundaries. Because again, he's kind of doing a pastiche, I guess, of like a whole bunch of possibly French, possibly Italian, possibly neither, and just full of shit. Like, again, the fact that I can't tell, I think lends credence to how good of an actor Kenneth Mars is. Or then you need to mention in the same breath, Austin Pendleton just kind of doing the Austin Pendleton thing he always does. Like, I don't know how else to describe what he does as an actor, but he just does his thing, right? Like, yeah. And of course, Kenneth Mars, I am Hugh.
He's so funny. I've only seen him in a handful of things. He shows up in a Twilight Zone 1985 episode.
Yeah.
And again, he in Fletch, he's kind of just playing a bit part where he's He's Barbara Stanwyck's dad, the guy who owns the Boyd Aviation. So it's what kind of a name is Poon? I believe that's Kenneth Mars, right? Yeah. I really appreciate everybody in this movie just being on the same page, because again, like this movie's not an easy ask. It looks easy, but this honestly, like the fact that this movie works as well as it does near flawlessly, tell me another one of these movies that's come out in the last 40, 50, 60 years that even comes close to the amount of jokes that work, that don't feel forced, that this movie has.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's an excellent point. Yeah. And to speak to your earlier mention of Kenneth Mars, yeah, he turns up. He had a working relationship also with Mel Brooks, obviously, because he's in Young Frankenstein and the producers. And then later on, he appears memorably late in his career in Citizen Ruth, which was the first film for Alexander Payne with Laura Dern. It's the satire on abortion, if there is such a thing.
I have never heard of that movie, but I would be interested to watch it, given that
my God,
Alexander Payne is he's a Nebraska boy from way back from literally when he was born.
Yes, that's true. If you have not seen his first film, it's a knockout. It's great, and Kenneth Mars is in it. I think he plays an abortion doctor but it's basically two sides. Like there's pro-abortion people and anti-abortion people, and they're paying off Laura Dern. One will pay. She's going to take whoever gives her the most money to either keep the baby or abort the baby. So they're basically taking. I don't want to say too much about it. You have to see.
Holy shit! How is nobody else? Honest to God, dude. Whenever you and I do a show together, you mention movies that I'm like, I'm going to watch this, and I don't know how nobody else has mentioned this to me.
Yeah, Citizen Ruth is a must see. It's really good, and Kenneth Mars turns up, and it was made, I think, I want to say that was like 98, something like that, 97, 98, somewhere in that range. But it's a really good film debut for Alexander Payne. You could see why he went on to great films like Election and Sideways and so on and so forth, because it's very well done.
I don't think I've seen any of his movies.
Yeah, I would recommend them. He's very good. I tremendous fan personally of Sideways and just Election.
Okay.
Nebraska.
I have seen Sideways. Okay, I have seen Sideways,
yeah.
Which I liked. Sideways is good.
Yeah, if you get on its wavelength, which I did, it really appealed to me a lot. So yeah, but Citizen Ruth is, like I said, features an interesting later career turn from Kenneth Mars in there. So yeah, he turned up. I guess the point I was trying to make is that he would turn up for pretty regularly for close to 50 years before his unfortunate passing. But Austin Pendleton's still with us, thankfully, and every now and then we see him. But yeah, he kind of does the same thing, like you said, in just about all of his films.
I don't know what to call it. Like I don't know what you would call it, but like he's just, there's something about him. There's something about who he is and the energy that he has, that every role that he does, it's like, yeah, I understand why you're playing that role. Like it makes perfect sense. Cause it's just like, he just seems like a really nice human being. I don't know how else to describe it. Like he's obviously a guy who works a lot on Broadway and on stage a lot. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, like a lot of stage actors kind of have a sensibility to them that they turn in good performances. And I think it's just like, for someone like him, it's just second nature. I don't know.
I think you're right. That's a good point. And I think we should mention, while we're on it, that this film was ranked number 61 on the list of the 100 greatest American comedies published by the AFI when they were doing those things in the late 90s, early 2000s. They used to have those lists. And so it, and it turned up at number 68 on the AFI's list of 100 greatest love stories in American cinema. So,
which I think is that surprising? I don't know if it's surprising.
Maybe a little. I don't know.
I mean, it is a romantic comedy, right? But the romance feels incidental. It's not. The focus of the movie is not the romance between Barbra Streisand and Ryan O'Neal. It just happens naturally throughout the, hour and a half runtime of the movie. But I mean, they share one romantic scene together.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the one with the piano. Yeah.
Yeah. But which is like maybe the one part of the movie that could be excised, but I get why it's in there. Like you got Barbra Streisand in your movie. Like that. Come on, like you got Barbra Streisand in your movie, like you're gonna have to find a way to get her to sing. So I get it.
Well, I have a lot of problems with getting people to see this because she's in it. Because people have this idea about Barbra Streisand, and they're I don't watch Barbra Streisand movies. And I try to tell people it's not really a Barbra Streisand film. I mean, she's in it and she does a good job in the film, but it's not really a Barbra Streisand film. it's more of a film of its director than it is a Barbra Streisand film. She just happens to be one of the participating actors in the film. So
what is so let me ask you something. What does your perception of that mean? A Barbra Streisand movie? When someone says, I'm not going to watch a Barbra Streisand movie, because I'm curious, because I kind of have my answer, but as someone who's probably seen more Barbra Streisand movies than I have, what does that mean to you, at least?
Well, I think people have this idea of just musicals, because she's so well known for Funny Girl and Yentl and A Star Is Born, and as we mentioned, On a Clear Day You Can See Forever, and there's so many of those musicals in her on her resume that I think people have this idea that it's all musicals and musical comedy, and they don't realize that she's really an adept comedic actress when given the opportunity, and that they just have this preconceived notion, I guess, of what she does, and this is not that. Is what I try to tell people. This is not that. You'll see. And you'll also see a lot of character actors in here that will make you feel instantly comfortable, as we just talked about. And another one, Sorrel Book from the Dukes of Hazzard, Boss Hogg. He's one of the people who's out to steal the duffel bags. So where else are you going to see a film with Barbra Streisand than Sorrel Book? Let's put it that way.
Well, and I think, it's an interesting point. Like it again, I guess my interpretation of that statement is the same. It's like, oh, it's just going to be a bunch of bullshit singing, and it's going to be kind of I guess, I don't like, are they assuming that the movies are also up their own asses? Like, is that also the other thing? Because I guess Streisand is considered such a diva that must go. Like, I don't get it. Cause like, again, I have not seen a single Barbra Streisand movie other than this one. And this one's pretty good. But again, to your point, like, it's not really a Barbra Streisand movie, and she's good in this movie. But if it was just her being a great performance and nothing else, this movie wouldn't work. Everything else has to work just as well. She's a part of this movie, because this movie is, in a lot of ways, similar to Naked Gun and other comedies. This movie feels, in a lot of ways, not necessarily like a movie, but like you're watching someone putting together a machine in front of you that starts to work all in tandem the longer it goes, and you have to see them place these pieces. And as they're placing the pieces, they don't place them incorrectly at any point in this movie. There's not really a joke that doesn't land. Like I said, there's a moment in the movie that doesn't work for me, and that's the moment where the movie's pace grinds to a literal halt so that Barbra Streisand can sing a song. But like everything else in the movie, all the jokes land, and I can't even remember a movie where all the jokes land. Like, that's not a thing.
Right.
Even Naked Gun 1 has jokes that don't land. Even Airplane has jokes that don't land. And it's not that they didn't land then and they don't land now. There's just some jokes in Airplane that don't land. I think every joke in this movie actually hits the mark, which is shocking in a way, because that's almost an impossibility.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. And I think that, it's interesting to mention the genesis of the script for this film, because we were talking about it earlier, who it was written by. But the whole project actually started, I think, when John Calley, who was the head of Warner Brothers, he called Peter Bogdanovich into his office. And Bogdanovich at that point had only, I think he may have finished shooting The Last Picture Show, but it wasn't out yet. But he was looking for his next project. And this is like early 1971. And he asked him if he was going to put Barbra Streisand in a film, what kind of film would it be? And he said, well, a screwball comedy would be my choice. And so that's kind of how the ball got rolling. But she had a limited window of time where they could get this done. And so they basically, the information I'm getting that in my research was that they had to start shooting in August of 1971. And this was like May, and they didn't even have a script. So they put together a script with two different sets of writers. There was first the Robert Benton and David Newman that had done Bonnie and Clyde, as we just mentioned. And then Buck Henry came in and did his polish or whatever, his second version. And so they went through 3 drafts, both of them. And so there was a lot of work getting the scripts in shape between May and August of 1971. And so then they started filming in August, and the film was actually released in March of the following year, 72, which is pretty amazing, the turnaround for all of this elaborate stuff. And we can get into the big chase sequence through San Francisco. That supposedly accounted for about a quarter of the film's total budget.
What a surprise, said no one. I know what it's look, I have never seen the movie that inspired it. I have not seen Bullitt, and I feel like a ding dong for that, because that's one of those San Francisco movies, and as someone who was born across the bay from San Francisco in Walnut Creek, someone whose mom grew up in San Francisco, someone who likes to think that they are at least keeping in mind the history of their family and stuff like that. I've never seen one of these San Francisco movies, but it kind of doesn't matter because the chase scene is so good on its own that it might be a spoof of chase scenes, but it's almost more impressive than anything else someone could do with a car.
Yeah. That's true.
Like it's like there are cars in this chase scene, but they're in a fucking rickshaw, like, or not even a rickshaw. It's like a delivery bicycle.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's and I just don't know how they pulled it off. And it was a $4 million budget. So with a $4 million budget, and you're talking a quarter of that, it's about $1 million just for that sequence alone. That we were talking about, the sequence where they the whole chase sequence in total it's about like I said, roughly $1 million if you're talking a quarter of the film's budget. So it's but I can't imagine how they pulled some of that off. And it's unsubstantiated, but supposedly they all wind up in the bay, of course, when the Volkswagen is still floating. Of course, that was a joke, that Volkswagens would float. And so they get that in there. But there was an unsubstantiated story that I found that said that Sorrell Book almost drowned when they were in the bay floating at the end of the film. So I don't know how true that is, but I could see that. There's a lot going on there.
And I what I really like about the chase at the end of the movie, because obviously, again, by the point we reach the chase scene, I think we're kind of at this like fever pitch in the movie. And you mentioned there's this the big chase kind of is the end, more or less the end of the movie. But the scene before that, I think, is so interesting in informing you how crazy the movie is about to get, because once kind of all the main players in the chase get to Austin Pendleton's house, it's like all hell breaks loose.
Oh yeah.
But then, you think, oh, okay. Because again, having never seen this before, I'm like, all right, this is going to be contained to this room and something will happen. But I don't think, who knows where it can go from here. The moment they go outside and get on that bike, it's just like, holy shit, like this, it's going there. Here we go. And the moment you realize that the bike is going to be the focal point of the chase scene it's just, again, like it's totally cartoonish, but because they avail themselves to do something so cartoony, it ends up being so much more technically impressive. But I really like the scene beforehand too, because you get all the players that are going to be kind of crucial to the chase scene in that scene. You get Randy Quaid beating people up. You get Austin Pendleton beating people up. You get Kenneth Mars taking whipped cream pies to the face over and over again. And it's again, like that scene is a really great kind of interpretation of slapstick comedy done and cartoon comedy done in real life, because you've got people getting knocked over by things and pratfalling. Essentially, it's again, like nobody else is doing this, and it's because it's not easy.
No, I can't imagine all the planning that had to go and the choreography that had to go into shooting this. Logistically, I can't imagine what all was required. When you see it, it's a I call it a slapstick ballet is what I would call it, because it pretty much is just the way it's so perfectly timed, and this I don't know, I'm in awe of it every time I see it. From a technical standpoint, the movie's funny, but technically you look at how they're pulling this stuff off, and it's quite impressive.
Well, and I think we'd be remiss if we don't mention the pane of glass.
Oh yeah, of course.
It's like, again, so as we all kind of expect, when you have a chase scene, you're going to have a pane of glass show up somewhere that someone's going to drive through or run through or possibly try to avoid. And we see every derivation of it in this movie in one scene, because the movie tricks you into thinking, okay, you're going to see somebody go through it. and they don't. But then the movie does the smartest thing possible, and the bicycle can't go up an incline, so they have to turn around and go right back through the same intersection. And it's just the logical conclusion of the guy on the banner flying into the pane of glass. That is pushing the joke to its furthest limit and knowing the exact perfect moment when to cash in, when to walk away from the table. That is, again, just another indicator of the level of competency with which the script was written.
And you're just making me remember gags that I just love. So, like the guy who gets out in the Volkswagen minibus, I guess you would say, after it's been crashed into about 4 times.
And it falls over.
It falls completely over.
or the fact that we get Ryan O'Neal and Barbra Streisand going through, because again, it's San Francisco, so they have to go through Chinatown. They get a giant Chinese dragon head on the front of the bicycle towards the end of the chase. They understand kind of, if you're in San Francisco, a very iconic city with trolleys and a large, again, Chinese and Asian population, so much that Chinatown, I think when we think of Chinatown, in this country, you think of San Francisco's Chinatown or maybe New York's, but I always think of San Francisco's Chinatown when I think of Chinatown. Like, you have all of these things to play with because you're in this city. And on top of everything else, you have the natural hills to necessitate. Again, I don't know what the topography is like where you live, but they couldn't do a chase like this here. It's way too fucking flat. But in San Francisco, they have the hills. They have, supposedly they destroy, and apparently the scuff marks are still there. The Alta Plaza Park got damaged during the chase scene. Yeah. But like, you have a moment where they have the crossing trolleys and they go in between them. Like they know what they were doing, and they know the exact kind of gimmicks that being in San Francisco can yield, and they do all of them. The only thing I was surprised is they didn't do the windy street.
I'm surprised too. I mean, they do have the one sequence where all the cars are going around the curvy street. There is that, but that's about it.
And probably because it was a little bit more technically hard to do, but I mean, again, Jesus Christ, everything else that they've done in that chase scene is such a technical masterpiece anyways. It could be gilding the lily at that point, maybe. But anytime you have a chase scene with a like non-motor vehicle and motor vehicles, and you can actually pull it off, it's impressive. Yeah, it's technically impressive, and it's really funny. All the gags land. And they're, for the most part, gags I haven't seen anyone else do.
Yeah, that's a good point, and not really before or since. Like I said, there's a lot of these films that Bogdanovich is paying tribute to, but even they didn't pull off some of the stuff that he pulls off in this film. This is totally a different kind of animal, even though it's paying tribute to some of these earlier films. But it's interesting to note where his career was at that point, because he had done Targets, obviously, for Roger Corman, which had gotten him some cachet. It was a controversial film about a guy who just starts randomly shooting people, for no reason at all. That was his first film. And it's Boris Karloff's second to last film. And essentially what happened was Bogdanovich was obviously a film critic before, and he really wanted to venture out into making films. And so he had gotten to know Roger Corman to a certain degree. And Roger Corman said, listen, I've got Boris Karloff owes me a couple of days of shooting. And I've got some Karloff footage that we never used for, I think it was Dementia 13, I want to say was the film. And anyway, he said, he owes me some work. And so you can get him for about 2 days, and you can come up with a script with where you can use Boris Karloff. Well, and so he came up with this script idea that Boris Karloff is a retiring horror film. Basically, he's playing himself, obviously, but he's retiring from the horror movie business, because he says that the real life horrors cannot compete with the horrors that he does on screen, or he can't compete with the real life horrors. The horrors that he's doing in the movies can't compete with what's really going on. And then this guy suddenly just leaves his home one day and goes on top of a tower and starts shooting people.
I was wondering if it was a Charles Whitman thing.
It's similar. It's very similar.
I figured it was. But a guy who just goes and starts shooting people is like, is this a Charles Whitman thing? Like, is this?
It is.
I mean, again,
Yeah.
I grew up in North Texas, so like that's
Sure, you know,
yeah.
And so this was and of course their characters converge at the end of the film. I don't want to say too much about it, but the Boris Karloff character and the assassin converge at the end of the film in a pretty memorable way, I would say. And you just have to see it to think. That's coming out on Criterion, by the way. They're putting that out on a Blu-ray in about 4 months, I think. So it's coming soon for the first time ever on Blu-ray.
I'm that again. God damn it, Adam! Stop adding movies to my list of things to watch. I'm not even joking, man. Like everything you mentioned is like, I gotta watch this now. I gotta watch this now.
Yeah, Targets is pretty effective. It really, really is. And Bogdanovich has a pretty substantial role in the film too. He's in it as well. I think he plays Karloff's agent, or he's somebody connected to the Karloff character. But so the Targets had the bad luck or bad timing of being released around the same time that the Robert F. Kennedy assassination took place. And so it was kind of unceremoniously buried. They didn't want to get behind it too much, because of what was going on in the culture at the time. So Targets was critically well received, but just didn't quite make the career for Bogdanovich that he had hoped. And so he was, still looking for that thing that would kind of put him over the top. And of course, he found the story goes that he was in a supermarket and saw a paperback, The Last Picture Show. And he picked it up and started thumbing through it, took it home and read it. And he said, well, this is actually, he just liked the title. And it turned out he really liked the book. And so he reached out to Larry McMurtry.
Talking about more Texas, man. Fucking Larry McMurtry.
Yeah,
like
he did. Yeah. And so they shot that, I think, I want to say it was fall of 1970. And they put that together. And of course, there was a whole controversy that went on when they were making Last Picture Show. Of course, he was married to the production designer, Polly Platt. And then he wound up having an affair with Sybil Shepherd while they were making the film. There's a whole story there. And there's a terrific 1-hour documentary on the Criterion Blu-ray of Last Picture Show that recounts all of the drama that was going on when it was being made. And it's really a lot. It's almost as interesting as the film itself. And so the film came out in the fall of 71 to really was wide praise just about everywhere. And of course, it became a multiple Oscar nominee. So he was shooting What's Up, Doc around the same time that Last Picture Show was getting released. So he's out promoting Last Picture Show and shooting What's Up, Doc at the same time. I don't know how he kept up that schedule, and not to mention his marriage breaking up and just all of that going on at once. That's a lot on somebody's plate. So the Oscars were in early 72, and and of course, Last Picture Show won a couple of awards there. And so around the same time What's Up, Doc was in theaters, his film was racking up the awards at the Oscars. So that's what I meant by saying that his career was really on fire around that time. And it would continue to do so the following year with Paper Moon. Was just about as big of a hit as the other last two films, Last Picture Show and What's Up, Doc. Paper Moon continued. But after Paper Moon, things got pretty bad for him for a while. And there's always been a rumor that Polly Platt, his ex-wife, who continued to work with him after they split up, she left. She just couldn't work with it. She said, I can't work with you anymore. And she just basically stopped their professional relationship after Paper Moon. And the films really went down in quality in terms of, I think some of them are not bad. None of them are total disasters, but the critical reception for those films that he released after Paper Moon up until the late 70s, there were some really, things went really bad for him really quickly. There was a musical that he did with Sybil Shepherd and Burt Reynolds, At Long Last, Love, which completely tanked, and ironically is one of the most valuable Blu-rays out there now. If you have a copy of it, it's going for a couple $100 on eBay. But
does Burt Reynolds sing in that movie?
He does. He does. Sings and dances. Yeah, in his tuxedo and all that. So
I've seen Pierce Brosnan singing in Mamma Mia enough to know that that's not going to work.
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing. But yeah, he does these Cole Porter songs. I think it's Cole Porter songs. I think, and he's got a thing for Cole Porter. I don't know if you noticed in What's Up, Doc.
In the elevator,
they're singing. Yeah. Well, over the beginning credits, there's You're the Top, which Barbara Streisand sings solo. And then over the end credits, you get Ryan O'Neal and Barbara Streisand singing together. And that's from the musical Anything Goes. And then, as you mentioned, the music coming out of the elevator is Muzak versions of Cole Porter songs as well. So there's a lot of Cole Porter going on there. And then later on, he would use the Cole Porter in At Long Last Love. And then he made one more attempt at a kind of a movie set in the 30s, and it's called Nickelodeon in 1976, which I thought it's semi-successful.
I'm a fan of W.D. Richter's, one of W.D. Richter's other movies. I'm a big fan of big fan of old Buckaroo Banzai.
Sure.
I saw that. I was going to ask you, is Bogdanovich's perception, is he a comedy director? Like I don't looking at his filmography, again, having seen literally nothing else, I don't understand. His body of work doesn't seem to have a singular genre to it.
It doesn't. It's kind of all over the map. I guess the only two things that he never did, I don't think he ever did a Western, and he never did a horror film that I'm aware of, but everything else is there.
Yeah.
Even the, Mask was a big hit for him with Cher, and, the story of Rocky Dennis with
Eric Stoltz.
Yeah. And I saw that in the theater when it came out. I saw that opening the week it opened, and really, really completely moving film for me then and now. And so that was kind of after many years in the wilderness. And of course, everybody knows the story about his romance with Dorothy Stratton in the around 1980 when he was making. They All Laughed with his good friend John Ritter, and so he made that. And of course, she was murdered before they even finished editing the film, and so he had to go back after her death and look at the dailies and the footage and put it together. This person that he had fallen in love with, he had to deal with that every single day, go back and look at this footage of her after her husband had murdered her. I don't know how he did it. He wrote a book about that, of course, called The Killing of the Unicorn, which is interesting, in case you don't know that story.
I just I'm sitting, the look on my face might be giving that away.
Yeah, that's, they fell in love, and it was a very deep, passionate love. And when they were making They All Laughed, and then she went back to break it off officially with her husband, and he kind of knew that's what she was there to do. And so he made sure that didn't happen. He killed them both, her and then himself. And it was a horribly tragic end to her. She was just in the beginning of her career. So it's Bogdanovich had a really sad life in a lot of ways, because he started out the decade of the 70s with these big hits, and then not only did his career suffer, but then he had this personal turmoil that I just can't imagine. I've thought about that many times. How do you go and edit a film with the person that you were romantically involved with after they've been murdered brutally? And have to sit there and because you can't you got to move on. The show must go on, as the saying goes. But to be faced with that on a daily basis, I can't imagine.
That's insane. That's the thing. I feel like for whatever reason, Bogdanovich as a director is just a blind spot. And I don't know why. Again, that's why I ask, what is his perception in the industry? Because best I can tell, most of his movies they seem to be their own thing.
Yeah, they are. Well, he had a fondness for the directors of his childhood, as most of us do. That's kind of the way it goes. We love the people we grew up with, and he was no exception. He loved Orson Welles and John Ford and all those guys, and Howard Hawks, and he became friendly with them, to the point where Orson Welles was basically homeless at one point, and so he let him come and live with him. Basically gave him a bedroom in his home. So, because Orson Welles, no secret that he was financially struggling a lot of the time, because he was taking all of his money and trying to finish these little odd films that he was making on the side. And he would take the work from television commercials or whatever he could get, so there was all of that going on, and he just didn't have a lot of money.
I heard that man liked his champagne.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah.
It's a little bit.
That's crazy. That's interesting. Yeah. This movie was not at all what I was expecting when someone says a Peter Bogdanovich movie. It's not this madcap dash across San Francisco, but yet having seen only this now, this is such a distinct and unique starting place for again, like you said, Last Picture Show is his first movie, I guess second movie, and this is his third movie. those movies sound wildly different from this. Like, but then these other movies that you're kind of mentioning, they sound kind of more comedy leaning, more so than those last two did. So I wonder if this is kind of the beginning of where he's going to, start moving into comedies. And again, he does. I mean, I was, looking at all of his other movies, and they're all like half of them are comedies, or at least classified as comedies, which is interesting because, again, I hadn't heard people being, oh, he's a funny director. It's like, I've never heard anybody say that.
Well, he, as I mentioned, At Long Last Love was a serious misstep because Sybil Shepherd, he was obviously romantically linked with her. They had lived together for quite a while after they met on the set of Last Picture Show. And I think she had done an album, and he had this idea that she could sing, and that she was going to be somehow or another make it as a recording star. So he just decided to do this musical. And I think that was the point when there was this thing that was building up with the public. They were kind of getting tired of them parading around as a couple. And when that happened, I think that was like the breaking point. But before that, he had done Daisy Miller, which was an adaptation of a Henry James novel. And now Quentin Tarantino is a big defender of that one. I've heard him on his podcast defending Daisy Miller. He's a huge, huge fan. And I've seen it. It's okay. But I think there's something to be said for some of the choices he makes in that film that he didn't make in his previous films. As I said, his production designer, Polly Platt, I think she would kind of whisper in his ear things about, like, maybe you shouldn't do this, maybe you should do that. She was also kind of a uncredited creative consultant. And so without her guiding hand, he was, things just didn't go so well for him for so long, starting with Daisy Miller. And that was part of, don't know if you're aware of this or not, but there was a company that Francis Ford Coppola and William Friedkin and Bogdanovich signed on together. There was a company called the Directors Company, and the three of them had a contract with Paramount where they would do so many films, the three of them together. And it was a big deal at the time. I think it was announced in 1973 or something that they were all teaming up, these three big wunderkind directors, and they were going to join forces, and they were in this new company called the Directors Company. And I think the only film from the Directors Company that actually came to light maybe was Paper Moon. You'll see when it during the opening credits, if you watch it, it says the Directors Company presents. I don't think any of the Friedkin did any films for the Directors Company, and I'm thinking Coppola, I want to say maybe The Conversation was part of the Directors Company.
I think you're right.
Yeah, I think so. But that was kind of a disaster as well. So didn't go so well. So there were a lot of missteps there following Paper Moon. So
it sounds like Bogdanovich just had a career of stops and starts. I mean, not every director has a career with as many ups and downs as it sounds like he had. Which, I mean, again, better to have had ups and downs than no ups at all.
That's true. But when in the early days, when he was good, he was good. I mean, you can't deny those first four films, like I said, Targets and Last Picture Show, What's Up, Doc, Paper Moon. It's hard to argue with the quality of those films. I mean, they are really, really top-notch films, all four of them. And it's hard to quibble.
Well, and I'll tell you, it's hard to quibble with this movie because this movie was a lot of fun, and it's definitely. I mean, it's a movie that I'm going to definitely suggest to more people that I know either haven't seen it or maybe haven't seen it in a while, because it does have a wide, I think a wide appeal. And again, if you can quote get over the fact that it has Barbra Streisand in it, which again, as someone who had that in their mind before this, but was willing to watch the movie because it's just a movie. It's not like I'm going to watch it and at the end of it, I'm going to be dead and murdered by media. It's just a movie. Just sit down and watch it. If you give the movie the opportunity, and again, like you said, just know that it's, quote, not actually a Barbra Streisand movie, whatever the hell that actually means. The movie rewards a viewer who is engaged. And I think the movie keeps you engaged throughout. And these kind of movies, these kinds of comedies, the reason Naked Gun got canceled canceled is because you forced you to, quote, actually watch the show. This is one of those movies where, and you kind of mentioned it at the top, it rewards repeat viewings because you should and will, and I already have since I've watched it twice, find different things and notice certain things and pick up on different things that you maybe didn't pick up on the first time you watched it.
Yeah, I think that's all true. Yeah, but I would recommend those who haven't seen it or aren't familiar with it or just write it off as one of those Barbra Streisand films to give it a shot. It's certainly worth investigating, and I'd find it very shocking if you didn't find something to laugh at. I mean, there's so many great gags in there, and a
like variety of gags too. It's not just one kind of gag. It's not just slapstick comedy. It's not just dialogue humor. It's not just metatextual jokes. Like it's everything. And I mean, again, like it's not always funny, but I think this movie is for the most part always funny. And I think that, again, when you have funny people who know how to be funny, it helps when you're trying to have a funny movie. It's the other thing. No, I don't think anybody in this movie doesn't know how to be funny either. I mean, a lot of these actors are comedic actors, but a lot of them aren't necessarily considered comedic actors, like Barbra Streisand, like Ryan O'Neal.
This is all true. This is very, very true. Yep. So, yeah, it's like I said, just never fails to put a smile on my face. And if you're dating somebody and you think it's funny, use it as a litmus test, like I do. It's always good for that.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, no. Thank you for bringing this one to my attention again. I had it mentioned to me before, but definitely had just not gotten around to watching it. And hey, any movie that ends with Bugs Bunny and Porky Pig on screen because it knows it's a cartoon and it transitions into a cartoon at the end, I'm always a fan of. I mean, we didn't even mention that, but that moment is 100% earned, and it totally works. It totally works, and it's super. I think it's the second most meta moment of the movie behind the kind of love story reference.
That's true. I just for some reason I was just thinking of the gag where Madeline Kahn is where they send her to the wrong address. Barbra Streisand sends her to the wrong address on purpose. And, what are you doing with Howard's rocks? Those aren't.
Those are his rocks.
Oh my God.
Yeah, we barely even mentioned Madeline Kahn, but she, it's not that she's not given a lot to do, but she is kind of playing a specific kind of character in this movie. But I think she's really good. I like Madeline Kahn a lot. Obviously she's such a big part of Blazing Saddles, and I love what she's doing in this movie, kind of playing the harried girlfriend who gets a happy ending in the end. But I think I don't know. She's always just so charming.
Well, you must see her, my friend, in the next film, Paper Moon, that they made together, because she was Oscar nominated for that one, and deservedly so. She is absolutely hysterical in that film. You've got to see it. She plays as I said, Ryan O'Neal is a con man, and the film is, like I said, a series of vignettes that take place during the Depression, and he's traveling across the country doing what he does as a con man with a little girl who may or may not be his daughter in tow. That's essentially the plot of the film. And one of the places that he stops along the way is at a county fair, and Madeline Kahn is a belly dancer there. And so he's extremely attracted to her and invites her to join them for a little while. And so there's a whole vignette where she joins Tatum O'Neal and Ryan O'Neal, and they wind up going to a hotel and staying together, and he's really got his eye on her, so to speak, and it is just terrific. The actress who plays Madeline Kahn's assistant in the film, her name is PJ Johnson, and I interviewed her for I guess it was the 45th anniversary of this film. I think it was. I interviewed her for Movie Geeks United, and it's out there. You can see it on YouTube or whatever, our website. And she had a lot of good things to say about Bogdanovich and making the film and working with Madeline Kahn. But the two of them together, what a team in that film.
I mean, I'm glad to hear that Madeline Kahn was also probably a good person as well, because she's so effortlessly charming. Oh, yeah. And anytime she's on screen, I don't know. I mean, in this movie, she's playing, again, very atypical of what I had seen her as, the character in Blazing Saddles, which is in and of itself such a I don't know. It's such a fucking great character in such an already great movie, but like here she has to play a very specific role and it works. Like I wouldn't think such a big personality actress would be able to play kind of such a small character in this movie. And I don't know, she's just so good. She plays that like just exhausted girlfriend so well, especially when she comes into the kind of the banquet hall. They're dragging her away and she's just a house of fire coming in there and then they're having to drag her out. It's just, my God, she's so good in this movie.
Oh yeah. She absolutely is. She nails it. Yeah, we always laugh about the scene where they drag her out and her heels are leaving marks on the floor as she goes.
Yeah, no, it's again when they know in this movie to really go after some like physical comedy bits and the slapstick. I don't know. It's just like you said. It's there are not a lot of movies like this, and the movies that maybe this is inspired by this, I believe you 100% that this is better. And oftentimes when you have the opportunity to see the other things and distill it down and kind of condense it down into like its like purest form, I don't know. I don't know if I would ever need to see another live action cartoon if I watch this movie. Like it even now it checks enough boxes that I don't think like I need to see an updated version or anything like that. It's such of a time and of a place, but it all just feels, I don't know, it all just works. And God, the fact that it works, I think, is the most impressive thing of all, frankly. So final thoughts on What's Up, Doc, Adam?
Well, I think it really holds up beautifully 50 years on. I'm so glad that it does and that people are continuing to discover it. Like I said, as long as I'm drawing a breath, it'll always be one of my favorites and one of my go-tos. I'm always going to have a copy of it in the best physical format available, whatever that is at the time. Right now it's Blu-ray currently, and I'm hoping that there may be a 4K issue of it at some point in time. But it does have a nice Blu-ray that really looks pretty spectacular for what it is. And I think there's a featurette on there, but nothing more than that. But yeah, it's just a film that, like I said, really puts me in a good mood anytime that I watch it, even though I've seen it so many times. And I've owned it in so many formats. I've had VHS, I've had a Laserdisc, I've had DVD, and now we're... Oh, and there is a commentary on the Blu-ray too. There's two commentaries, I believe. I think there's a scene-specific commentary with Streisand and Ryan O'Neal, I want to say, and then there's the actual director's commentary with Bogdanovich. So if you want to get more into the nuts and bolts of the film and what it meant to them and what it was like to be there making it, you can get that physical release and listen to those commentaries.
I would like to hear the Bogdanovich commentary on the movie.
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah. Very, very informative, and it's worth your time if you can pick it up. And it's on the DVD too. So if you don't want to spring for the extra bucks for the Blu-ray, you can just get the DVD for probably less than $10, and you still get the commentaries.
Pennies on the dollar at this point. Pennies on the dollar. Yeah, DVDs. Where does one even buy a DVD anymore? Like, God.
I'm still shocked, not to digress, but I'm still shocked that the largest percentage of physical media that's being sold today is still DVDs.
I know, it's amazing. Wild.
Anyway, go ahead.
Where are people buying them? I don't know, but apparently people are buying them en masse still.
Yeah.
No, I'm with you 100%. Again, I had this movie mentioned to me before, and I was kind of apprehensive because, again, it is a movie that has Barbra Streisand in it, but it is not a Barbra Streisand movie. And shame on me for making assumptions, but also, here I am having watched it and I'm totally with you. I will probably watch it again before the end of next week. And I'll probably have watched it 2 or 3 more times before the end of the year, at least. It's a lot of fun. It's a movie that definitely rewards future viewings and it rewards people that are engaged. And I think the movie does a good job of keeping you engaged. And this kind of movie, again, it seems easy, but that's because everybody who's working on the movie is operating at literally peak performance. This movie making this look easy means it's immensely harder than you would even imagine it could be. And this movie sings along and is just, again, it's damn near perfect movie. There's nobody miscast. There's really only one scene for me that I have a quibble with. But again, it makes sense why it's there because, again, it has Barbra Streisand in it. And I would have put that scene in my movie too in 72 with Barbra Streisand. And you would have. And anybody with half of a brain would have. But all of that aside, I'm so glad that I have now seen this movie, and I'm glad that I was able to talk about it with someone like yourself who is as, again, as passionate about it as you are, because you're totally right. It's a movie that if I were to watch it on a bad day, it would probably put me in a good mood as well. Because by the end of the movie, when they land the love story joke, and then they have Porky Pig singing you out, out to your car, or leaving or turning the screen off, it's totally earned, and it puts you in a good mood because it's a really well done comedy. And hey, man, that's not easy, especially now. It's not easy, but even then, it wasn't easy. So
it is true. It is true.
So until the next time you and I do an episode together, Adam, where could people find you on the internet if they were looking for you?
Oh, you can go to focusnewspaper.com. I have a weekly column that recounts all of the latest theatrical releases and home video releases. And then we do our podcast where we jabber on for about an hour or so about all the latest physical media releases on moviegeeksunited.com. You can find that. It's posted about once a month. Jamie Duvall and I, we've been doing it for almost 10 years now. And you can find us on all the regular places, Stitcher and Apple Podcasts and all those wonderful places where you go, Spotify, all that.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's always about Apple. That's where it is. It's like I think the number is like 75% at this point.
Sounds about right.
Yep. Yeah. So as for this show, you can find this show over at weirdingwaymedia.com and culturecast.com and all the places that you've been hearing me mention for the last damn near almost a decade here as well. So yeah, I get it. But yeah, that's where you can find me. That's where you can find this show. Patreon, as always, is a thing if you want to help out financially, but like, rate, and review wherever you get the show, which is more than likely iTunes. Adam, thank you so much for joining me, man. This was fun, as always.
Oh, yeah, I totally enjoyed it. Totally a blast.
And as always, we'll catch you on the next episode.